I'm going to show you guys how to lift the rear of your F-150 by yourself on the floor. Most of the videos showing installing rear lifts are from the manufacturers, and they're always going to be on a lift in a shop. So we're going to show you how to do it on the floor by yourself. This is going to be the same process for pretty much any size rear lift block. We're just going to do 1 inch over stock, which is what we have now. So the truck right now is leveled. It is perfectly level, but we need to bring the rear end up a little bit because I do tow with this truck and often have a good payload in the back of it too. You're going to want to raise up the rear of your truck as high as you can, and by that I mean as high as your jack stands will allow you to. I should be using my 20-ton jack stands, but they are being borrowed by somebody right now, so all we have are these little ones, so we don't have a whole lot of room that we can raise the truck. If you're in this kind of situation where you just have the small jack stands, you're going to want to remove your rear tires to do this job, because you're going to have to lower the rear axle quite a bit more to make room to remove those blocks. So we'll raise it as much as we can, put it on these jack stands on the lowest part of the frame right here, and then we'll remove the rear tires. Remember, when you're doing this, obviously your parking brake isn't going to work, so chalk your front wheels, both sides, front and back. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and raise this thing up as high as I can, and you're going to jack right underneath here on the bottom of the rear differential. So right here you can see what I'm talking about when you need to drop the truck down. If your jack stands aren't tall enough, you're going to run out of room before you can droop your rear axle enough to do the job. So I have the frame of the truck on those jack stands on either side, and if I drop the axle anymore, obviously the tires will be touching the ground, so we won't be able to do this job completely. So go ahead and remove your back tires if you're dealing with this situation. Once you have your wheels and tires off, it'll be at this point that you can go ahead and see how much axle travel you're going to get when you start to lower this thing down. So depending on how many blocks, if any, you use when you raise this thing, you may have to remove some to get to full droop. But let's see what we got here. See if we can drop this thing all the way down without having to remove any blocks. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. So that should give us just enough room to work with. We shouldn't need any blocks for the lift kit install. We'll just need to put them back in whenever we go to put the tires back on. All right, so once those are out, go ahead and support this thing once again without any blocks. We are going to have to relieve some tension when we go to take this thing off. It's best to go ahead and compress the springs back just a bit. That way when you go to loosen the nuts on your U-bolts, nothing's flying apart at you. This work on the passenger side just because I have better lighting over here. But we're going to start with this top bolt here. It's just going to be a 15. Then for the bottom here, we're going to use an 18 mil wrench on the nut towards the outside of the truck and a 15 mil socket on this side over here on the impact. Once that's off, then we can go ahead and work on the hardware for the U-bolts. So one of the reasons it's important to go ahead and tension up the suspension in the back, once again, is so you can remove this hardware. Obviously, I was able to just pull that bolt right out, but if you have weight on the truck one way or the other, from the springs, then it'll make getting the hardware out a little bit more difficult. I know many of you will not be replacing your shocks at this time, but I wanted to show you that you do get a benefit from going with a +1 or +2 shock at the same time. So here's the Halo Lifts rear shock, and you can see it's about 2 inches longer total. So you can actually reduce your ride quality a little bit if you go with too high of blocks in the rear and your shock isn't long enough. You're going to be bottoming out your shock and also damaging it. So if you can, it's a good idea to go ahead and get some longer shocks for the rear at the same time. Okay, now that we have the shock out of the way, we can go ahead and break loose the hardware for this U-bolt right here. Don't take these bolts completely, these nuts completely off. Just loosen them a good bit. And when they're almost to the end of the travel, then you can decide if you need to preload the axle more or less. You do run the risk of damaging yourself or the hardware that you're working with if you just zip these things straight off and they're under a bunch of tension. Okay, that should do it, I think. So as you can see on the F150 here, anything that's in this newer design is going to have these two locating pins. That's the only reason that I'm okay with stacking blocks. If you're working on something that has a single relocating pin, or sorry, a single locating pin, that's a bad thing to do. Really, if you can go with solid blocks, that's what you want to do just in general. I have actually seen single pin blocks go bad and shear, and then the block will start to walk and can't even shoot out. So that can be really dangerous, and I recommend not stacking blocks on pretty much anything else, but I feel pretty safe doing it on the design on the F150. Let's drop it down a little more. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so once that's in place, we can go ahead and start raising up on the rear axle. Every now and then I've noticed sometimes the axle will kind of want to shift and you'll need a ratchet strap or something to get it back in place. So I'm hoping we don't have to deal with that today. All right, so yeah, it's not lined up quite the way we want it. The locating pins are just a little bit rearward, but I put a tiny bit of tension up on the axle to the spring, so we should be able to move it by hand and set them in place. Yep, there we go. Just took a little tug, and that was pretty much it. All right, we'll go ahead and raise it up. Get it tensioned where they should be, and then we can see how long our U-bolts are gonna be, if they're gonna be too long or not. Okay, these are gonna stick out maybe an extra 2 inches, so that's really not that big of a deal. I'm gonna go ahead and install this, and I may cut them afterwards, but I'm not gonna cut them right now. All right, so before you crank these things down, you want to double check, look all around, make sure your blocks are perfectly straight or as straight as they can be. And then also look at your rear bracket here and make sure it's oriented in the correct direction. Really, there shouldn't be too much play or adjustability in this. You shouldn't have to worry about it. You just want to double check and make sure you're not doing something stupid. All right, so depending on the brand of rear block you get, some of them use super long U-bolts that go way down. In our case, our U-bolts are not going to be any lower than the rear shock. So aesthetically, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and trim them up. I may still do that, but for right now, we'll leave them and I'll go work on the other side. All right, over here on the driver's side, I'm going to give you a little bit different camera angle, but we're going to be doing the exact same job. This way you can just see it from a different point of view. Same thing as the other side. Very first off, we'll just remove this top shock bolt. This one on the driver's side does have a nut keeper on it, which is handy. The bottom one does not. It's going to be exactly the same as the passenger side bolts. Okay, again, make sure you have tension upward from the jack so you don't pop any of this hardware on yourself. Get our spacer installed in the back. Then we can raise this thing up and get it all aligned again. Okay, cool, that went in just fine. That wheel around. Okay, now that we have the hardware installed on both sides, we can go ahead and torque this to spec. Okay, so there is a torque sequence to the U-bolts. It's something like 39 foot-pounds, then 59, then 89, and then 110. I may not be exact on the lower numbers, but I know 110 is the final one, so you want to do a crisscross pattern of torque. So, you know, start with this one and then go to that one, and obviously all the way around till you get to your final torque. So what you do, careful with the hardware you use, they're really cheap, like Chinese. Aluminum kit, you may have some issues with the hardness of the hardware, so just keep that in mind. You have to have the truck completely on its own weight, so either have the truck on the ground at this point, or like I'm doing, I still have them down, that's just fine. Okay, so first one needs to up on the ground. Now that you work, I'm not going to do full sequence. Hang on a second, sequence 110. Now what we've got to do is install our shocks again, whether you're putting in the factory ones or some aftermarket ones. Now, some shocks are going to be required to install the opposite direction of your factory ones with the shaft in the down position, so just keep that in mind. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this up, get everything torqued and get my shocks in, then we'll pull the truck outside so you guys can see how it looks, and I'll take a final measurement to see exactly how much lift we got. Here's the end result of installing those rear blocks. Let me get a straight side shot so you can tell. In person, you can definitely tell the difference. I did go ahead and measure it, and I gained exactly 1.5 inches over where we were before. So I think it looks perfect. It's exactly where I wanted it to be. It's less rake than from the factory, but it's gonna be the perfect amount for towing and having a payload in the back of the truck. So yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I will put a link in the description on where you can get these blocks. You actually cannot buy them directly from Rough Country for some reason. You have to buy them from a third-party distributor. So this just goes to show pretty much anybody can do this in the garage by themselves in about 30 minutes in reality. If I wasn't videoing, this would have been a super fast job. Power tools definitely make it easier, but you don't have to have them. Well, this next step in my F-150 upgrades turned out pretty good. The video I'm gonna do next, hopefully, is gonna be on my front coilovers. So I don't know exactly if that's gonna be a job I can do myself. If you guys have watched any of my other videos, you know my back is like broken. I had a failed spine fusion that really kind of screwed up my whole life. But I may do these coilovers myself. I may take it up to the shop, to the Excursions Unlimited shop, and see if they can help me out. So with a lift, that should be a super easy job, like 45 minutes or less. But you can probably do it at your house as well. Shouldn't be a problem with jack stands. I just can't bend over really. So I can lay down on my back and do that stuff all day long. But there we go. Looks pretty good. Stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button so you can keep up with the F-150 saga. And I'll see you guys soon.